Welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with Deborah and Rob Maldonado with Creative Mind. And today we are talking about how to create change in the world, which many people are thinking about these days. How do we change the world? And we're going to go deep into what does Eastern philosophy say, higher wisdom say about that idea of social change and making an impact on the world.
Well, to say that the world is rapidly changing is an understatement. There's rapid change. And so we all need to be on board, and we all need to be conscious of what is our part in this rapid changing world, and how do we enact it? How do we play our role without losing ourselves in it, without kind of buying into hate or the battle mentality of us against them.
You know, I hear this a lot from our clients and students. How do I approach something that I want to change in the world? What's the best way? Like, how do I work with my feelings that I have? How do I approach change? What can I do? So I'm not doing anything, but how do I do it in the most impactful way that's going to have the best for me, you know, in my experience of life. So we turn to a person who actually made change, dramatic change, Gandhi, who used spiritual principles, higher wisdom to liberate India from the British Empire. I mean, not a small feat. So, I mean, if this little half-naked man, tiny man can do it, and he got it from the Gita, that we all have that power. Like, if one of us can do it, we all can do it. And there's so many things that are important to us individually and as groups that we want to take a stand in. And this would be maybe a different way to think about how do we create change. So do you want me to read the quote?
Yeah, let me just say something about the quote that a lot of you have read or heard this. If you want to change the world, be the change that you want to see in the world. That's actually not his quote, but it's kind of an interpretation of the spirit of his quote.
The cliff notes of his quote.
Yeah, the actual quote is this one.
We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, or woman, so does the attitude of the world change towards him, her, or them. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do. Powerful.
Right. So we see in Gandhi's philosophy a pointing towards ourselves. And of course, that requires acceptance of our responsibility to the world. Because if we're simply thinking that we are the ego and responding to the world and seeking justice through our ego sense, then it's a very limited perspective, and it only leads to escalation. And this was his idea, of course, that you don't want to just escalate. You don't want to just kill your enemy.
Minimize them in some way to conquer them in a way.
Exactly, because that just leads to the same process of force being the ultimate arbiter of justice. And that's not the kind of world we want. We want a world where people express their sense of justice from within, from higher knowledge. That's what he was aiming. So his aim was not to destroy or ridicule or defeat the British, but to actually change their mind, because he saw that when you're opposing someone else, you're caught in the same struggle.
Yeah, you're both caught up.
You're both caught up, exactly. And so it's an opportunity for both to grow.
this is even in our small world. I think about big issues, but if you think about it in your small world, you have conflict with someone. If you meet them at the same level of conflict, they come at you, there really is no resolution because you're both projecting on each other and caught up in ego. And so the only way to really resolve conflict is to find out what is pulling from you, like we teach in our trainings. So this really, even on a micro level and a small little individual level, if we learn how to do that on our small individual lives, how can we impact the world? So this comes from the Gita. We can learn from the Gita in this. And this is what he basically got his inspiration from as he...
Yeah, I mean, well, he was well read. So Gandhi, of course, was inspired by the teachings of Jesus, the Jain tradition, the Sikh tradition, as well as the Hindu or the Upanishads, which are distilled in the Gita, the wisdom of the Upanishads distilled in the Gita. But in the Gita, it's made up of 700 verses, 18 chapters that really take place right in the middle of a war. So it's very apt to speak about conflict, and it's happening right as these two armies are about to clash. The forces of the Pandavas, who's they have Krishna on their side as an advisor, and the forces of the Kauravas, who are the cousins, so they're family members fighting each other, which is also apt because we're all related as human beings. And so when we fight other people, when we oppose other people, we're opposing parts of ourselves as well.
Humanity, and
And so there's a lot of teachings in the Gita about what is your duty, how do you act out of duty, but through spiritual or higher principles.
Well, in the beginning of the Gita, it starts out with Arjuna not wanting to fight, saying, I don't want to enter this battle. He said, if they win, my side dies. If they lose, that side dies. Like there's no reason, like there's no, resolution if one side is going to lose. And so he just gave up. And that's where Krishna said, well, you have to do your duty. You're a warrior, so you have to do your duty. And so we all, I think, have things we're passionate about in life that we feel like is our duty. Like we need to protect certain people or believe in certain things. And so we have to honor that. We can't just give up and say, well, I don't want to hurt anyone and I'm just going to spiritually bypass my way through life, like pray for a better solution. That we're saying that in the Gita, Krishna said to Arjuna, you have to fight. So, but it's not the fighting that we are used to or that we've been conditioned to fight in the world.
Yeah, that's exactly where Gandhi comes in, because his understanding then was informed not only from this teaching of the Gita, but also from the yoga tradition, which has ahimsa or nonviolence as one of its principal edicts that one should follow in becoming a yogi. Nonviolence means working with your own anger, working with your own sense of internal sense of justice. That if you're acting out of ego, of course, you want to punish the other person. You want there to be an equal, a tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye.
Isn't that sort of our instinctual response? Yeah. Like it's like the first response is always that I got to defend myself. I got to take action.
Yes.
I have to.
It's
I get angry,
natural.
almost like you get angry.
Yes, and the whole idea in these teachings is that there's nothing wrong with this. This is our nature, but we have to work with it. That if we simply act out of that natural tendency of the ego mind, we're acting out of conditioning, we're acting out of ignorance in essence.
In almost the same level of other people acting toward us or toward the ideas. Because we're really fighting ideas. We're not fighting people. We're fighting ideas, and we just tend to personalize it when it affects us.
Yes, ignorance leads exactly to that conclusion that it's the other person that's opposing me. Therefore, if I get rid of them, if I kill them, if I destroy them, if I cancel them, or whatever we do nowadays, that the problem will go away. And that's not really true, because ideas, they don't live in individuals, as we've seen throughout history. They live in the world of ideas, and they'll collective. Resurface over and over.
Yeah, think about it, all the issues of the world since the beginning of time. We're still kind of dealing with these same issues, keep coming up with inequality and wealth in one area and not another, men and women, like all these areas that in our world we're still fighting with, because it's an idea, not a person. So 1,000 years ago, none of those people are alive, but the idea still survives. And so the idea is really in consciousness, right? Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
It's in the conditioned consciousness of humanity.
Yes. Then there's a deeper wisdom also in the Gita, which Gandhi brings forth, that hate does not hurt the other person. It doesn't hurt your enemy. It hurts you. It hurts the holder of the hatred, of the anger. It's a corroding element in your own psyche, in your own heart. So that's the deeper wisdom. He's simply saying there are deeper principles that we can use in building a society, a just society, than force, right? Then whoever has the guns and the power wins. Because if you go by that, all you can do is replace who's in charge, who has the most guns and who has the most power, and you're back to the same,
flipping and flopping of power. And it's like the Game of Thrones. So no matter what happened, that it's a spinning wheel, where there's someone has power at one point, then another person gains power. And it's this duality that we're in this world, that if we get caught up in it, that's what causes the pain and suffering in our life on both sides of any issue.
Yeah.
And so when you talked about hatred and that it doesn't serve, I just want to say that we don't want to just push it away and say, oh, I can't be angry because I'm like Gandhi, right? We want to be able to express our emotions, be in touch with them, but also know that when we hang on to the hate, it actually can become very destructive. So it's not dismissing it, but it's how do we work with it?
Yes, and it's certainly not saying not to take action. All the teachings of the Gita, and including Gandhi, were very adamant about this. It does not mean inaction. It does not mean passively accepting whatever the situation is. You always take action. You always do what you know and think is right. But again, with that deeper understanding of non-aggression, non-violence towards the other, but simply doing your duty as a citizen, as a soldier, whatever role you're playing, you carry out your duty, but with that non-attachment or non-hatred, non-aggressiveness.
Well, wouldn't you say that if you're acting out of aggressiveness or hatred, it really is a weaker way to be?
Yeah,
because you're basically it's a fearful response.
Yeah, it's a lower way of acting based, or it's closer to ignorance than it is to higher wisdom.
So when we talk about changing the world, we have to shift from an ego's perspective to change to a spiritual perspective or a higher wisdom perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, if we're acting out of our natural instinctual mind, the conceptual mind, the ego mind, we're simply escalating the situation, and it's going to turn to aggression, to violence, again, to war, to the situations that we know simply cause more human suffering and lead to nowhere.
Yeah. Because even if someone destroys the enemy, they're going to suffer because they have to live with that. They have to live with that harming someone else
Yeah.
to get their gain. So it's like, how do we look at it from a different perspective? How do we get from ego to a higher wisdom perspective?
Yes. And then as human beings, we've evolved our technology to such an extent that it's very dangerous now to escalate in this way.
Well, think about Twitter and Facebook fights, people having social media, especially during the pandemic and the election. People were just at each other. It's just people. I mean, I know a lot of my friends were, I don't even want to go on social media. We just don't want to be there because there's so much vitriol on it. And that's not, you're not going to win an argument. You're not going to make anyone change their mind through making them feel stupid or talking down to them or making fun of them. So there's that kind of like wanting to diminish the enemy in a way.
Yes.
Minimize them, make them look
Yeah.
wrong. And so that's not going to solve a problem because no one wants to be wrong. As soon as you say you're wrong, the defenses go up. And that's the ego way of approaching it.
That's right. So the great lesson in Gandhi's work, in the Gita, in Cesar Chavez's work, in Martin Luther King Jr., it's that we have to cultivate this nonviolent way of interacting and making social change in the world. Now,
Nonviolent resistance.
nonviolent resistance, that's right, but also nonviolent activism, that we're not passively accepting things as they are. We're saying, yeah, we definitely need to all do our part and make the changes, but we need to do it in a certain way, in a thoughtful, mindful way. And that mindful way is through nonviolent active participation.
I love that. Nonviolent active participation.
Yeah, that's right.
So what would be the first step to that?
Yeah, so if you notice in Gandhi's quote, he's pointing to the individual. All these tendencies are present in the world, that are present in the world, are found in the world of our body. So he's saying what we're seeing simply ourselves expressed in the social setting, our own conflicts, our own internal pushing and pulling away from things, that we want things and we want to do certain things, we want to possess things, and at the same time we want to get away from them. So we're always caught in that duality. And that duality is precisely the ego's dilemma, that it's always trying to find a balance between the things it desires and it wants, and its freedom and its sovereignty. But that balance cannot be found in the ego state, because you can only move from one extreme to the other one. And you see it in the world, right, that where things move, that pendulum swing from one way of being to the other way of being.
And there's no middle ground.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you say that the ego is invested in being right and being on the great side? That's one of the things Carl Jung said, is that that's the hardest part about working with the shadow, because you have to face the parts that where you're wrong, and there's this like hard right and wrong. And so the ego, based on past assumptions, is going to see things only one way. And a lot of our assumptions are based on what we've been told and conditioned to see. And so and both sides, right? So both sides are conditioned to see things a certain way, and they both think the other side is wrong. And then they're both in ego, and they're not understanding what's going on. And I remember when I was in college, my writing class, the teacher made us write the opposite of what we believed in on a certain issue. And so I had to do the research, and I was so sure I believed one way, and then I saw the other side, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it kind of made me see both sides. And I think when we're in ego, we don't see both sides. It's like when we have a conflict, I said, with someone in our life, we think we're right and they're wrong, and then we're not able to see, we can't see beyond the conflict. But if we can say, well, what would make them want to do that? And what am I resisting? We start that self-inquiry. We can start to see things in a different way, instead of that rigid, defensive, one-sided
Yes.
way.
Yeah, and so the ultimate lesson is we have to cultivate it. In other words, you have to make a decision that, yes, this is worth cultivating, this higher understanding, this higher knowledge that comes through spiritual wisdom, the wisdom traditions, the work of Gandhi, the work of these powerful people that were willing to put their lives on the line.
They all put their lives on the line.
In
right?
order to demonstrate that love is the most powerful force in the universe. And you see it, that, here you had the British Empire with all its power, unable to defeat this little guy because he was holding this higher principle of, no, non-violence and love is much more powerful than guns and power
and
political
oppression.
power. Yes.
Yeah, it reminds me of that scene in the movie Gandhi where the British soldiers were like beating the people and they weren't fighting back and they were just falling down. And then after a while, the soldiers sort of felt like this is wrong. So it's like they didn't have to fight back. The mind of the soldiers started to turn about what are we doing here? Like they're not fighting us back. It's that when you don't fight fire with fire, something new can emerge, compassion can emerge, and it doesn't mean we don't fight. It doesn't mean that we don't passionately care about an issue that we feel is right, but it's almost like we can't approach it as I'm right and you're wrong. We have to approach it of where is the conflict within me? How do I get out of that ego thinking to understanding myself in a bigger way, so I know how to approach change.
Yeah, and Gandhi
and be
understood,
more effective.
Yeah, and Gandhi understood that it required a lot more courage to be nonviolent than to be violent.
Oh yeah,
because violence, let's say, it's a defense, like it's an action that you're taking physically towards another human being, whereas non-violence, you're letting your guard down, but you're still insisting on the change that you need to make.
But not with a violent way, which is interesting. It doesn't mean weak. It's actually more courageous.
It requires more courage to be nonviolent and to take action. Mm-hmm. So that is where teaching, learning, practicing, cultivating these qualities comes in. That they're not going to be there just because we understand them to be the right way to do things. We're going to have to cultivate them. We're going to have to teach it to our children. We're going to have to, practice them continuously and learn by making mistakes. That's the only way we can do it.
So cultivating that love and compassion toward the enemy. I know for me, when I see something that upsets me, that I'm passionate about, the first instinct is have anger. And then I often wonder, like, okay, what do I do with that? I know this isn't helping. It's making me miserable to just stew in the anger. And then you could spend afternoon just trolling the internet or reading articles or watching the news and getting that anger. It's really just hurting you. So it's recognizing, wait, this is not the right approach. So how would someone go from that place? Because we've all been there. We get mad at certain things that happen in the world, and we want to make a change. And I guess that anger triggers us into action, because if we weren't angry, we wouldn't take action. Yeah. So there's a gift in that, but it's about how to use it, but then transmute it into something.
Yeah, so it begins with self-inquiry. All the higher teachings begin this way, that you have to consider, why is this anger arising within me, and what does it mean?
What's threatening? What is really going on?
So, and this is where a lot of people kind of make the mistake, and I've done it myself, right? That I think, well, if I ignore or suppress the anger, then I'll be acting in this spiritual way or a higher way. But that doesn't work. We have to acknowledge that, the anger is within me. It's definitely a part of my psyche, of my body, like Gandhi says, and it's part of me. It's actually arising within me.
Yeah,
And
it's like it's already there. Like no one can
Yeah.
put anger in you.
that's right. And that accepting responsibility for your own anger is the beginning of it, because then you're able to work with it in a sane way instead of suppressing it and trying to present a spiritual, nonviolent face. That's not going to work. It's
Well-
simply going to build up, and it's going to come out in other ways.
Or you might say, I'm angry. Oh, okay, I can't feel angry. I'm just going to put light around the planet and hold my intention for a beautiful world, and I don't need to, like, almost like I don't need to fight out there. So it sounds really nice, but you're not taking action, and it's about action and emotion. And I remember I heard the Dalai Lama, someone interviewed him, and they asked him, like, aren't you angry? Like, you're the spiritual person. Like, they took over your country. They, killed and did terrible things to your people. Aren't you mad at the Chinese? Don't you have anger toward them? And he said, how do you deal with that? And he said, well, they give me a great opportunity to work with my own anger. So it's like he's like, I'm using this. And of course it actually helped him go and bring Buddhism more to the West. He's reaching more people than ever because of this. And not that it was good what happened, but it's like he's using it in a way to bring higher knowledge, higher awareness. And so it's almost like a higher level than just the ego battle that we're doing on the human level. There's a higher place to be while we're also engaged in the human experience.
That's the difficult part, right? That people want justice. They want to punish the other person. They want to kind of hold on to the hate for the other person. But that's precisely the message of higher knowledge. It's saying it's easy to love the people that love you, the people that don't oppose you, that think like you, that are like you. It's the easiest thing in the world. Even criminals can do it.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to get to the point where you can be compassionate and non-aggressive, non-violent towards somebody that opposes you, actively opposes you. And think about Gandhi's situation. The British were actually killing his people.
And putting him in jail. He was in jail for...
Putting him in jail, restricting his freedom, is in every possible way opposing him. Yet he was able to cultivate that state of mind of, they're simply acting out of ignorance. Therefore, if I fall into anger and aggression towards them, I'm hurting myself and I'm hurting my own cause, my ability to make the changes that I need to make.
So when we say compassion, we're not saying letting them off the hook. We're not saying they're right and I'm wrong. We're not saying that they're good people, I should love them. It's more that they're a part of, it's almost as a reflecting of part of you that you're angry at. They're representing that mirror. Like he says, the mirror, we but mirror the world. And so when you're clear on what you're mirroring in that person, then you could get the person out of the way and understand the idea that you're trying to battle. And then when you take the person out of the way, you realize it has less hardness to it or less rigidness to it, because the ego's designed for socially, to be in a way in the world and feel threatened for survival. But ideas, when it's not assigned to a person, it just has we can work with it in a different way.
Yes. So to make real social change in a creative way, not in a forceful, temporary way that's just going to create more animosity, we need to cultivate this understanding that the so-called enemy, the person that is opposing us, or the group that is opposing our ideas, is actually doing us a favor. They're allowing us to cultivate this higher wisdom in ourselves, in our own mind, and to enact it, to actually act out of that higher purpose.
And the duty itself, it gives rise to a purpose for some people. It gives rise to, how do I really do make the change in the world, like that puzzle, and cultivates courage, cultivates facing a challenge, builds community, and imagine if we can do it in a nonviolent way, that we can change the world.
Absolutely. And you've seen, let's say we've seen people that have made huge changes in the world and have gotten us here safely to this point. They've sacrificed a lot to do that work that it's their destiny to do that work, right? So the lesson of the Gita then is do your duty, meaning perform your duty as a citizen, as an activist, as whatever position you're placed in as a teacher or a coach.
Leader.
Do it well. Perform your duty, but practice this higher wisdom of non-aggression, non-violence, doing your duty with non-attachment towards the result.
And it doesn't mean you don't care about the result, but ego's not getting tripped up in it. Because if your ego's tripped up in it, you take action toward change, and every little thing you're looking for a sign that your actions are bearing fruit. And then you're in this like cycle of up and down, and you're really looking at from the perspective of the senses. That, this showed up, okay, maybe it's not going to change. And then this showed up, I feel good. And you're on that roller coaster. So non-attachment is you're passionately believing, passionately taking action, but you're not in that everyday, everything that shows up getting triggered, because you can't be effective that way. Because I've seen people, they get so passionate about something and then defeated, passionate about something and then defeated. And then also that, almost like that ego joy of the other person failing. And so that's not very good either, to see the other person or laugh at the other side for failing either. I mean, the ego loves to do that. It loves to be right, loves to be on the right side.
Yeah, and also I think to recognize that we can't do it alone. We need to reach out to take care of each other.
Yes.
And part of the work that you see in Gandhi and some of these great leaders is that they always understood it's about taking care of each other. It's about taking care of community. It's about softening our hearts and not buying into the anger. Finding ways to communicate, to reach out to the people that are opposing us.
And ask them and be curious, just like our inner self, the self-inquiry we do, our inner triggers, and we examine, like, what is this feeling? Am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling fear in this moment? Instead of just trying to push it away, to suppress it, to oppress it in a way.
And that it's not going to be easy. These are the hardest things to do for us as human beings, because we're conditioned, we're in ignorance of... Ignorance simply means that we're ignorance of the higher principles, of this higher knowledge of what is the nature of the mind, what is the nature of reality, that we see people as separate from us, when in reality, we're all in this together. We're all one family, one consciousness, one planet, right, that is in desperate need of understanding each other, of kind of joining each other in this
we're going to destroy everything if we don't find a way, a spiritual, a higher wisdom to deal with this. And Gandhi even, the reason he was able to cultivate compassion for the British soldiers is because he understood that on some level they believed what they were doing was right. So it made him less that they were trying to harm the Indian people, but more that they thought in their hearts they were doing the right thing in some, in their perspective. And so when we look at our enemy, I think the first question is, somewhere in them they believe they're doing the right thing. Like, assume that they have good intentions, and maybe their intentions don't match yours, but maybe just starting from the assumption they're not trying to hurt you, but they have a good intention even if you disagree. And then if you could start from there, you can have compassion, and then maybe having real conversations and showing your side without the defensiveness. I think that openness, just like in any relationship, if we were like fighting about something and I was like, you're wrong, and you're saying I'm wrong, we wouldn't ever resolve it. But if I was like, let me understand what your point, you let me understand my point, we start to have more compassion for each other. And it has to start with that, don't you think? And that's the hardest thing you said, is the hardest thing is to love your enemy, love someone who you absolutely have, the worst, you would be like, absolutely would not be able to love that person. And that's really a challenge for us to cultivate, because loving them doesn't take away your power. It actually gives you power. Hating them takes away your power.
That is correct. That is the wisdom that's encoded in the Gita, because the Gita is considered the distillation of the wisdom of the Upanishads, which we consider to be the ultimate source, the ultimate manual on human consciousness, the human mind, and the human awareness.
So we're going to be continuing our series throughout the summer with these concepts of higher wisdom from Eastern philosophy, and we just thought this topic is very timely right now, and a lot of people are having a lot of passion about things, fear, anger, all those emotions, and we wanted to give you another way to approach so you can lighten your heart and really make true change in the world and feel good in yourself.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
See you next time.
And don't forget to subscribe if you are listening to our audio on Spotify or iTunes. Also on YouTube, if you're here watching us, click the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode of Soul Sessions. And I also want to give a shout out to all our coaches that graduated our program that are sharing this work with their clients and really spreading that message of the powers within us and really changing the world one mind at a time. So take care, everyone. I'll see you next week.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.